think it should be in. But how do you think watching these Gentiles receive the Spirit while Peter is speaking, how do you think that might have affected Peter and the rest of these Christian Jews that came along with him? If you look at verse 45, it says, the circumcised believers who had come with Peter were astonished that the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out even on the Gentiles. So Peter had this group of Christians come along with him. And when you look at that, maybe it was because they just wanted to see what was going to happen. Or maybe they believed that God was going to give them a second-class salvation, a limited salvation. But when they saw the Spirit pour out on these Gentiles, it astonished them. The Spirit's on the Gentiles as well? Yes, it was. And yes, it was. Of course, Peter had to explain his actions. Have you ever done anything in the church? People come up and say, why in the world would you do that? How come you did that? Maybe they even say, hey, that was against our rules. So when Peter goes back to the other Jewish Christians, they question him. The believers in Jerusalem, they struggled with the fact that Peter is going to the Gentiles. How could you go into a Gentile household? How could you break the law like that, forgetting that they're not under law anymore? Jesus had died on the cross. Jesus had went to the grave. Jesus come out of the grave. The church had been established. They weren't under law anymore, but many of them were still adhering to the law. And so they're questioning, Peter, why would you go into a Gentile's house when you know that's against our rules? Acts chapter 11 and verse 3. You went into the house of an uncircumcised man or whatever and ate with him. You went in there. You sat down. You had a meal with him. They're challenging Peter. I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you reached out to them. But Peter's response, Peter began to explain everything to them precisely as it happened. So he had to tell them all about the vision he had. All about 3 times he was told, or he told, was spoken the vision saying, I'm not going to eat. 3 times he was told, don't call anything unclean. Told him to eat. And then he had to explain how Cornelius had a vision. And how he had sent 3 men because that's what he was told to do. He had to convince them that evangelizing people was the right thing to do. Friends, there are a lot of turning points in our lives. There are a lot of turning points in the church. There are a lot of turning points in our relationships. What we do with those turning points, how we react with those turning points is the key. Because there's always going to be 2 directions to go. Peter could have turned and ran. Peter could have never been obedient to the vision. Cornelius could have never been obedient to the vision. But they made the right choices. You know, some of the turning points that we're going to face, they're laid out for us. Others we're going to make ourselves. But one thing about it, the turning point's always going to be a place in our life of reflection and hopefully growth. Where we're going to stop and we're going to have to make a decision. of which way to go. And we may think back to what happened in the past. How does that affect the way I think now? And what is it going to cause me to do in the future? The greatest turning point in all of our lives was when we were offered salvation. There's a song that says, "What will you do with Jesus?" Friends, that's a question every human being has to answer. What will you do with Jesus? Because that's going to be the turning point. That's the decision. Do you choose to accept what He offers, or do you turn away? Friends, God is calling you right now. He's calling you today either to accept His gift of grace, or maybe He's calling you to step up, take on more responsibility, challenging you to grow. But it's a turning point for everybody in here today, because we have the choice. We have the choice how to react. If I need to be baptized, am I going to make that decision? Do I need to step up? I'm going to make that decision. Do I need to take whatever problem I'm having to God right now? Do I need to take it before the church? It's a turning point. What direction we go, it's up to each of us as individuals. So today I want you to stop and think about that. Think about the invitation of God. If you've never been immersed for remission of sins, you have the opportunity today to be immersed and come out a brand new creation. Sinless, perfect, washed in the blood. And Christian, you also have the opportunity to go to God and ask for direction, ask for strength, whatever it is you might be struggling with. And then listen for His voice. Listen for Him to tell you. Maybe you're struggling with something and you want the church to pray for you. We'd be glad to do that. Think about where you are in your life and what your turning point.